Hello everyone, we're the video boys, minus Grant today, but we just watched Wrath of Khan, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, and we saw Star Trek 12, Into Darkness.
Yes, these two.
Shall we begin?
Okay, so, Matt, you are very familiar with the entire Star Trek series pretty much, minus Enterprise, right? You've seen pretty much all of them.
I guess so. I've seen all the series. I haven't seen all the movies, so
All
sort
right.
of sporadic familiarity.
Okay. But you would not define yourself as a Trekkie, would you?
No,
Okay.
You're a Star Trek fan.
I guess so. Yeah.
But not that level.
No, I don't have enough knowledge. I guess.
All right, David. So your knowledge of Star Trek is relatively small, but you were a big fan of Star Trek Into Darkness, so that's kind of why you're in this discussion.
I
But
saw that in theaters. Thought it was really good. This is my first time seeing Wrath of Khan. It was pretty good.
all right,
I liked it. So I've only seen those two movies, and I've seen like a few Star Trek episodes off of like Netflix, but that's about it. But I want to see more when I have the time.
David.
Yes.
State the plot to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Oh man, you're asking the wrong person about this. I was like confused like half the time. Maybe someone else may have to do the plot. All I know is it has something to do with like that Genesis thing.
So the Genesis device.
Yeah, the Genesis device. That's all I know.
All right. So, in the late 20th century, i.e., time that's already passed, the 1990s. So there was the evil, genetically modified overlord Khan, who tried to rule the world as some kind of super advanced Nazi. But they stopped him, but Khan escaped, and he froze himself and floated around in space. But then in the old Star Trek series, the original series, there's an episode called Space Seed where Enterprise and crew find Khan, wake him up. He takes over the ship, tries to return to Earth and establish his, genetically advanced space dictatorship over Earth, but they stop him and they put him on a planet all by himself where there's enough resources for him to survive, but he can't get off of it with his genetically modified crew and try to rule the world again.
On Earth, 200 years ago, I was a prince with power of a million.
In this movie, there's the Genesis Project, which can create new life on dead planets by sort of terraforming and destroying everything on the surface. And they're looking for a planet without any life where they can test this, and they accidentally stumble upon Khan's planet, which has now been completely destroyed, and they've had a horrible life there because of a catastrophe that happened, and now Khan now has access to a ship and this Genesis Project technology, which, because of its terraforming aspect, is extremely dangerous. But the first thing he wants is to have revenge on Kirk.
Why are you here? And tell me where I may find James Kirk.
I love this movie. It's a classic for me. Every time I watch it, I find little things that I think are sort of strange or inconsistent, or they could have done without. But it's just sort of like nitpicks. I really enjoy the pacing, the plot, the characters. It's a classic movie. I mean, if you've never seen anything Star Trek, it's Wrath of Khan. That's what you should watch if you're not interested in all the TV shows and figuring out all the backstory and all the craziness, and give me the best Star Trek so I can just see that and decide if it's worth looking at the rest of it. Wrath of Khan, for me, that is the one recommendation. You need to watch it.
All right. David, what did you think of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan?
Well, I thought it was gonna be boring, but it was actually really good. Like Matt said, it's kind of like a classic movie. Not really as much action as I thought there was gonna be, but it was still pretty good. It was interesting. It was more of like a thinking movie. You kind of have to think about, you know.
All right.
But it was good.
All right.
I think I liked it a little bit better than Into Darkness, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Well, I'd like to say that I have always been a big fan of. Well, I've been a big fan of Star Trek, at least the original series and a little bit of Next Gen. I haven't seen very much of the subsequent series. I I like them. I like what I've seen of them. But yes, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, very good film. It got me into the series. That was the first Star Trek movie I saw, and I saw it as a kid. There were a lot of things that scared me as a kid, like a worm.
You said you were freaking out.
Yeah. What I like about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is the handling of its main character. I say this a lot when we were reviewing the superhero movies, and I feel the same way in regards to sci-fi movies, where you have an initial premise. I mean, superhero movies and sci-fi movies, they kind of go hand in hand in certain ways.
Yeah.
But
I see that.
but you have the main concept. The main concept of Wrath of Khan is genetically modified human tries to take a device which is capable of both terraforming and destroying at the same time. But beyond that, there's a story revolving around the main character, or rather around this group of characters. There's seven main characters in Star Trek, and the focus is, of course, Captain James T. Kirk and his interactions with his first officer Spock and his friend Dr. McCoy. But specifically, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is about a man going through a midlife crisis. And it's Captain Kirk going, well, he's turning 50, it's his birthday, and some of it relies a little bit on knowing the background of this character. He's done all these awesome things. When he was younger, he was a ladies' man, and he's done all these amazing things, but then he's promoted from captain, where he was able to explore new worlds, able to do new things. He's promoted from that to admiral, and now that he's admiral, he can't do these things, and he longs for the good old days. But he feels that because he's turning 50, he can never go back to that. Throughout the film, there are these revelations about him having a son with a scientist woman, and then he sees his life as it could have been, and that just makes him feel guilty. And then he encounters Khan, someone he interacted with years before. So all that stuff just weighs on him, and all the mistakes he makes and his resolutions. I like all that, and that's what I feel is essential to a sci-fi film, just as I feel it's essential to a superhero film.
There's a man out there I haven't seen in 15 years. He's trying to kill me. You show me a son, I'd be happy to help him. My son. My life that could have been. It wasn't. What am I feeling? Old. Worn out.
So, thoughts?
I didn't realize that kid was like that guy's son till like the end of the movie. I was like, what? It's his son? I thought it was just like some guy on the ship.
Also, that I'm proud. Very proud to be your son.
He's your son.
I must not have heard that part. I was in the bathroom or something.
Oh, you were here. You just didn't.
I was paying attention. I don't know.
But yeah, he has a conversation with a woman who he had a son with, but she wanted her son to be in her world rather than doing all the things that, well, all her.
Right. He grows up being a scientist is sort of resenting the sort of military attitude towards things, very suspicious of Kirk, and that sort of plays into their relationship.
You said scientists were like pawns of the military or something.
Right, because
Yeah.
they're doing a experiment for the Federation, and the Federation is supposed to be the scientific exploring people, but technically they're the only people with the military power.
Right.
And so I guess there's this constant threat of, well, what if the Federation takes control of the Genesis technology? Then they could, wreak havoc with it. I'm not sure what they would do, since there's only one like human Federation. They already rule everything.
Yeah.
It's game over already.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess they could do all kinds of crazy things with the Klingons, maybe. Who knows?
I didn't even see like a single Klingon in that movie.
Oh, there weren't. Not in
No.
Wrath of Khan.
Any suggestions, Admiral?
Prayer, Mr. Savick. The Klingons don't take prisoners.
It's just a little disappointing, like, because I've heard so much about the Klingons. I'm like, oh, I'm finally gonna watch the Star Wars movie. I can see the Klingons.
Star Trek.
Oh yeah, Star Trek, whatever.
Well, David, as you had pointed out, you were expecting Wrath of Khan to be more of an action movie,
Yeah.
but that's not what you got. You got more of a thinking
I'm
man.
just like sitting around in the ship, just watching Captain Kirk like drink and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a big difference between the movies, whereas you have, obviously, the newer ones are more action-oriented, but there are action scenes in Wrath of Khan. They're just sort of understated, like when they have the override code or whatever. It's sort of, I guess it's not really, they sort of pull it out of nowhere, right? The override code is something you've never heard of before, so it's
Right.
not like there's a big buildup or anything, but you still have this sort of tension, whereas, if they mess up the override code thing, they're all going to die, and they have to sort of, right down to the wire, figure out what they're going to do. And then, of course, you have the Nebula fight scene where they can't see each other, and it's sort of, you have the sort of long shots of them drifting past each other like they're, I don't know, sharks or something. It's kind of an interesting visual.
Yeah.
Like submarine warfare.
It was like a
Exactly.
strategy game or something.
So
It was cool.
you have a lot of suspense, I think, rather than sort of edge of your seat kind of action. But I think that it is very effective in the movie. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's an element that I think is missing from a lot of movies nowadays, where it's these days whoever has the bigger gun, they're the ones who are gonna come out on top, and then.
Yeah.
Though I gotta give credit to Star Trek Into Darkness that it has it there, but Enterprise succeeds anyway because they have Scotty there. There's a subplot there, but one thing that I really like about the space battles in Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan is that, in contrast to Into Darkness, which we'll get into. In Wrath of Khan, you've got the Reliant, you've got the Enterprise. Khan's on the Reliant, and Kirk is on the Enterprise, and they're about evenly. They're about the same in terms of strength. They're not. There isn't one it's not. Oh, the Reliant is so much stronger than the Enterprise. They can defeat him. No, it's the fact that Khan is on the Reliant that makes it a threat, and ultimately, what it comes down to in the final battle is that it's Kirk's experience as a commander versus Khan's intelligence when controlling the ship. So it really is a duel of titans in its own way. But earlier on in the movie, because Kirk is dealing with his mortality, dealing with the fact that he's getting older, and Khan is introduced straight off the bat as this superhuman, it starts off as like a David and Goliath thing, where you've got this really strong superhuman, you got this guy who's past his prime. And you could say that about their first encounter too, because when the Reliant first shows up, and Kirk hesitates to put up the shields, he's like, "Oh, it's another Starfleet ship. I'm not gonna put up shields yet." But he does it too late. It gets a whole bunch of crew members killed, and that weighs on him, and then it carries through to the later on in the movie when he's able to fight Khan. I don't know.
I like how Khan and his crew, like when they were in the ship, they were still dressed the same way. Like his shirt was all open and stuff. Like
Yes,
weird wardrobe.
Khan's chest is a character in the film.
Ah, Kirk, my old friend. Do you know the Klingon proverb that tells us revenge is a dish that is best served cold? It is very cold in space.
I think that's one of the strong points of the movie, is that the villain is very well written and very well acted.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
imposing sort of person. I think it's a good choice to go back through the episodes and find somebody in the continuity that would be like, here is something from Kirk's past that's coming up
Yeah.
again. And, you know, I guess find the villain who had the best actor playing them in the original series.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe there was an obvious decision, but it's a good choice.
Yeah, definitely.
My name is Khan.
So I feel like J.J. Abrams' style is, it's just like, well, you know, sci-fi movie, y'all just do it. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing about J.J. Abrams, and we could get more into that. J.J. Abrams is not a fan of Star Trek. He's a fan of Star Wars. And you can attribute the style of the new Trek
Yeah.
movies to his fondness for Star Wars. But we'll keep going back and forth between Wrath of Khan and Star Trek Into Darkness. But let's move on to Star Trek Into Darkness, and we'll go back and forth. Matt, what is the... No, wait. David, what is the plot to Star Trek
Oh,
Into
God.
Darkness?
This plot was kind of dumb, man. It's like, I guess this plot was a little bit easier to follow. I
Uh-huh.
think it's just kind of like a dumber plot.
Okay.
I guess like Khan, I guess he like kills a bunch of like Enterprise people, so then they get Captain Kirk to go like follow Khan to like the end of the galaxy on some planet
Yeah.
and kill him because he
Mhm.
killed a bunch of people. But then Kirk doesn't kill him, he just like captures him. And then Khan ends up like killing a bunch of people and then getting back to Earth and killing more people. I don't know. It was a dumb plot.
Matt, could you further
Yeah,
clarify?
man, you can
So-
clarify.
Khan blows up a Starfleet secret base in London, which is like a Section 31. It's like a Black Ops undercover CIA part of Starfleet. And so everybody in the Federation is out to get this Khan character, but this admiral who's very powerful and wants to go to war with the Klingons decides he's going to send Kirk out with these new prototype missiles
That's right.
to go and blow up Khan, who has teleported himself with a nice bit of continuity using Scotty's
Yeah.
transportation magical warp equation to go directly from Earth to Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. So they're going to fire it, go on a stealth mission, blow them up with these new advanced torpedoes that Klingons can't detect, and they're just going to sort of straight up murder him because they know that he blew up this Starfleet base and killed all these people. So they get there, but Kirk has messed up in terms of his relationship with Spock earlier on in the movie, and so Spock sort of guilt trips him into not just straight up murdering Khan, just bringing him in.
I will personally lead a landing party to an abandoned city on the surface of Kronos, where we will capture the fugitive John Harrison and return him to Earth so he can face judgment for his actions. Alright, let's go get this son of a bitch.
For trial, because they're civilized people and they can't be doing this
That
sort of
was
thing.
Spock's idea?
That was Spock's
Oh,
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so instead of blowing him up, they take him into custody, or he surrenders, even though it's clear that he can just sort of do whatever the hell he wants. He surrenders, and then he starts giving Kirk slowly hints that everything is not what it seems. The admiral that sent him to go capture him was actually trying to start with the Klingons and secretly betraying them, and so Kirk's got to decide, is he going to trust Khan, who killed one of his best friends, Admiral Pike, who got him into Starfleet in the first place, or is he going to sort of put the pieces together so it slowly appears more and more like Khan is actually telling the truth, and this higher up admiral, I forget his name.
Admiral Marcus.
Marcus is trying to start a war with the Klingons for his own purposes, possibly. Yeah, that's the plot.
All-out war with the Klingons is inevitable, Mr. Kirk. If you ask me, it's already begun. Since we first learned of their existence, the Klingon Empire has conquered and occupied 2 planets that we know of, fired on our ships half a dozen times. They are coming our way.
From his perspective, the torpedoes were actually not going to just kill Khan. They were going to be really huge explosions, and the Klingons were going to notice that, attack the Enterprise, and then he had sabotaged the Enterprise so they couldn't escape, and so there would be a confrontation between Klingon ships and Enterprise, and then war would start with the... you could see on that evidence how someone could sort of make up a story of how, oh, we need to go with the war with the Klingons now because of what happened.
All right.
They should have just left Khan alone. He killed a few people. Like, alright, Khan won that battle. Alright, like, you gotta chase him to the ends of the galaxy, shooting, like, experimental weaponry at him, and potentially starting a war with a whole planet just for, like, one guy.
That's true, but he was part of the secret shadow organization, top secret thing. Maybe he could probably give secrets to the Klingons or something.
Yeah, but the Klingons didn't even know he was on that planet, and they didn't seem to really care about him. Like,
and they
probably would have killed him too. Like,
they have a whole arc about Kirk in this movie about what it means to be someone's friend and when you're willing to risk your life for them, and when they're willing to risk their life for you. It sort of ties into the whole relationship between Spock and Kirk that just mirrors the one from Wrath of Khan, I think, rather nicely. Some people think it's sort of cheap and manipulative, but I think it works. But I think that's part of that plot when Pike gets killed by Khan. He's trying to avenge Pike, and that's why he wants to go kill Khan. So maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense why they would send Kirk there to like blow him up, but it makes sense at least why Kirk would want to go blow up.
Yeah, they added a personal motivation.
Just send a ship worth like billions of dollars and like a whole crew and like a whole thing for that guy.
You saved the crew. He used what he wanted against them. It is what you would have done. And this is what you would have done.
Let me state straight off the bat, at a recent Trek convention or something, they had rated Star Trek Into Darkness the worst Star Trek movie.
Oh.
And all
so many
the first one. I know. And all of the Trekkies there, they were cheering or something. And
have they seen Generation?
I don't think they have.
If you're a Trekkie, you must have seen Generation. That's inexcusable.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, so this movie has fallen under a lot of criticism, and I can see where it comes from. You were talking about the mirror scene. So in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, the whole movie builds to a point where Spock has to sacrifice himself to save the crew of the Enterprise. He goes into this radiation room, repairs something, saves the crew. And in Star Trek Into Darkness, they reverse it where Kirk is the one who has to go into a radiation room. He has to sacrifice himself. He repairs something, then he saves the crew. So that element of that, and then there's a tearful goodbye from Spock or Kirk, depending on which movie you're watching. And the thought is, and I think the reason a lot of Trekkies didn't like the movie was just because of that scene. It's like, wow, Spock's death is one of the greatest moments ever in Star Trek fandom or whatever.
Well, it is,
yeah, well, it is, definitely. but then the fact that they're trying to replicate that irritates them, you know. And in my case, it doesn't bother me because it serves within its own movie. You don't have to have seen Wrath of Khan to be able to appreciate that scene, but also the fact that it's set up at the very beginning of the movie. Spock wants to sacrifice himself to save an entire planet of people.
He's always trying to risk his life to save a bunch of people.
It seems to be like a Spock thing to do that. He says the phrase in both movies, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And so he sacrifices himself, tries to sacrifice himself at the beginning of the movie, but Kirk decides, at the risk of violating the Prime Directive and changing the course of the people of the indigenous planet, he shows the Enterprise so he can save Spock, but Spock doesn't get it. But then the roles are reversed. Spock has to break the rules in order to defeat Khan, and also Kirk has to do the sacrifice move, which it seems like throughout the movie, oh, is he willing to do this, whatever. He's not. He's not like Tony Stark where it's questionable, but he loves his crew. He's willing to do that, you know.
Well, I think the interesting bit is, if you've seen Wrath of Khan, you know that Spock is willing to sacrifice himself for Kirk, and Kirk says that in Star Trek Into Darkness. He says, well, you would have done this for me, right? But up to that point, you never see Spock actually risking his life for Kirk specifically. In fact,
Right.
it seems like he's always going against Kirk's decisions to do something like that, you know, risk everything to save your friends, right? And so you say, well, there's a parallel scene where then Spock versus like save Kirk, but Kirk doesn't know about that. Like he's dead at that point in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a nice little thing where he has that faith in him, and then it plays out in the movie that he's correct. He is willing to do that.
There's a whole ending chase scene where Spock goes after Khan, and the whole thing is about him trying to. Ultimately, it's about him trying to save Kirk, even though that's at the last minute when he finds out, oh, Khan can save Kirk. There you go. You know, he doesn't.
I don't get why they chose Spock to go chase after Khan, because you just got a bunch of policemen or something to go after him.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, because they then teleport Uhura down.
Yes.
So how many people could they have teleported down?
That's true.
Could they have filled the whole transport room with guys with phasers and just been constantly shooting him until he finally gave up?
That's true.
It was like set to stun. It wasn't even set to like kill.
Yeah, because they show Uhura just keeps on shooting him. Yes. They don't want to kill him, but they want to stop him.
Imagine if there were 12
people shooting him. I don't know. Maybe they would have done better.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. One noticeable difference between Star Trek Into Darkness and old Trek, or TV show Trek, is the science is not
as good.
Or? It's not accurate. Matt, you were pointing out at the very beginning of the movie.
Right, so Volcano is gonna destroy an entire aliens. I guess the whole planet. They say it's not clear how Volcano can destroy a whole planet, but it's gonna destroy the whole planet. So they need to stop this volcano. So they put a cold fusion device in the volcano because cold fusion is cold, and volcanoes are hot. You need the cold fusion in there to cool down the volcano.
And if I remember correctly, isn't cold fusion a way to generate like energy?
Right, well, the idea is
generate heat.
Fusion. Fusion is like basically the process. You know, you're fusing. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything about science on the internet before I get myself into trouble. But anyway, stars do fusion basically. So you can imagine there's a lot of energy involved, right? So that's hot fusion, the star. But if you could, you know, get that process going without the big startup of energy, right?
Yeah.
The huge amount of energy it's cold fusion, right? Because you maybe you only need a reasonable amount of energy to start a fusion reaction, and now you have this powerful, you know, well, you wouldn't want to put it in a volcano.
Yeah. It's the word cold, and the audience knows what cold means. So, if you put a cold thing in a hot thing, you freeze the hot thing.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, David. So, before tonight, this Star Trek Into Darkness is the only Star Trek movie that you have seen.
Yeah.
Overall, do you like Star Trek Into Darkness?
Yeah.
All right.
That was great.
So, what do you think of the movie overall?
Overall, I thought it was good. It was a little bit like, I know I was complaining that the other one didn't have enough action. I thought this one maybe had a tad bit like too much action.
Okay.
But it's okay. Like, it's still a good movie.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, there's
like at the end it was starting to kind of drag on a little bit. But,
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. You look at the endings of both movies. The crux of Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan isn't the space battle, even though that plays a huge role. It's Spock dying behind the glass and Kirk's not able to do anything. The crux of what happens in Star Trek Into Darkness is a foot chase to save Kirk, but the focus is the foot chase.
Right.
So that's kind of a difference in the styles of what was done before and what's done now. But Matt, as someone who's seen a lot of the episodes and a lot of the shows, do you think Star Trek Into Darkness and perhaps Star Trek 2009, do you think they betray or they undo what the original Star Trek was all about? Or
Ooh, tough question. I think in some ways they do, but I don't really have a problem with that. And in some ways you might think that they do, but they don't. So I wish I could remember the name of this video, but there's a really good video by SF Debris, a fellow internet reviewer, where he defends the changes that happen on Deep Space Nine that make sort of Starfleet more militaristic, give Star Trek big military plots where war is being waged and people are suffering. The future is sort of is dismal and sort of very complicated instead of being this sort of, it's very far away from Gene Roddenberry's vision of a future where the Federation is a symbol of people overcoming all of those sorts of problems like this war and hatred and things like that. And he gives just, I think, a perfect defense, which I can kind of try to summarize as saying, well, what really people want to watch and what's interesting about the future is sort of the relationships that people undergo and the trials that they have to face, and you can't really address issues of war. I mean, they did address issues of war in the original series, but in a different way. They're sort of just making parables about why it's bad and things like that. But there's a whole sort of universe of experience that you're leaving out there, which is this sort of actually participating in, what the individual decisions people have to make and how that can also be horrible. And so I think, in order to get what Gene Roddenberry was trying to do, you do have to sort of betray his vision a bit. And I think Deep Space Nine is a very good example of how that can work.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of things in Into Darkness especially, it's about, they have the whole plot with the admirals trying to use Kirk as a device for starting a war with the Klingons, and then you have Scotty's whole subplot where he suspects that something like this is happening because they won't let him look at the warheads. He thinks that they're doing some kind of evil military operation and everybody's being manipulated. And so they go into that territory where maybe in the original you would see something like that, a plot like that in Deep Space Nine, but maybe not in the original series, and maybe that's sort of a betrayal of looking on the future as this sort of
utopia,
maybe not a utopia, but like a symbol of sort of a realistic ideal to strive for the humor. It's like, well, we could be like that,
I see. Yeah.
But I think that that is perfectly acceptable.
All right.
I think maybe the emphasis on action scenes, like I say, a action scene that's like a Star Trek action scene is more like the Wrath of Khan action scene, where there's a lot of suspense and tension, and maybe not a lot of super high speed flying. I think you mentioned at one point that one of the chase scenes where they're running from the Klingons in the spaceship is more Star Wars than Star Trek. And I think that's exactly right. It looks like the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that you can't do it, like it's forbidden or something. But I do definitely prefer these sort of understated action scenes of the sort of old style Star Trek, and even in the show Deep Space Nine, where you have huge armadas of ships and stuff like. Or a perfect example is Best of Both Worlds from the Next Generation, which is a famous two-part, Picard and Riker versus the Borg showdown, where great scenes that have to do with directly with fighting, but it's not like running around shooting tons of lasers. It's it's like this. Here's a standoff, and you're not sure what's going to happen. There's a lot of tension there. I really prefer that sort of thing.